We're here. Look at this, all of us together. I'm Harris Faulkner. This is Outnumbered, really. My co-hosts Emily Campagno and Kayleigh McEnany. And on the couch with us, Carly Shimkus and Brian Kilmeade.
Woo!
What?
I can't believe it. First time
We're
in
back,
2019.
ladies and gentlemen. We're back.
This is it right here.
How about
I forgot how to get here. I mean, it's been that
Because
long.
it's not the Fox and Friends studio.
Yeah.
Right?
They did not know that. Okay?
Wow. Wow, these backdrops
they
really
do.
fool you.
It really totally threw me for a
Yeah,
second.
that's great.
This is amazing.
All right, let's do what we do.
All right.
New polls reveal President Biden is badly underwater on nearly every issue which Americans say are important to them. And that could spell disaster for the entire Democratic Party in about 200 days from midterm elections. A new ABC poll shows voters giving the president low marks across the board, but his numbers are the worst when it comes to the economy, with nearly 70% disapproving of the way he's handled particularly gas prices and inflation. And speaking of those gas prices, voters seem to blame Vladimir Putin and oil companies the most for the higher energy costs. But in a troubling sign for the Democrats, more than half of those surveyed faulted the party's policies and President Biden. This, as the Real Clear Politics average of polls shows the president with a high job disapproval rating, 54%. That's where it's going, 53.8%. Kayleigh, now, just think back to your days in the White House.
Yes.
If you had seen those numbers, what would be happening?
Five-alarm fires everywhere. I mean, because they're bad on every single issue. I mean, to the point of losing your base. When I think it was 35% of Democrats, 39% I think it was, of Democrats say there's more you can be doing on gas prices. Your own party is saying, hey, Mr. President, what are you doing? But think about this, Harris, in an employee-employer relationship, because make no mistake, President Joe Biden is an employee. He's an employee of the American people. Imagine rolling into your job at 10:06 a.m. That's when Marine One landed today. That's when he came back from his Delaware beachside vacation. When your boss has given you the worst mid-year review you could possibly get, 61% disapprove of crime, 62% immigration disapprove, 63% disapprove of the economy, and then your boss asks you why you're doing such a poor job, and you just don't even answer his questions. Just like Joe Biden goes to the podium, we ask questions, the press asks questions, and he doesn't answer them. You know, employees who do that, they get fired. And he might be looking at a reckoning in November and then 2 years from there.
Yeah, we see the belovable back of his shoulder
Yes.
as he walks away from us time and time again. Brian.
Couple of things. I don't think his numbers have recovered since Afghanistan.
Yeah.
And even though you put up mostly domestic issues, when we saw how he embarrassed the country in Afghanistan and left $80 billion worth of equipment on the ground, and now women are being subjected to all types of horror, people left behind, Americans not found. And then you see what's happened since with inflation rising high, just giving up on doing anything productive at the border. When you see things that happen, they are somewhat in his control, and you just see a lack of somebody whose hands are on the wheel. Number two is this is with a very compliant press. The press is pretty much in his is pretty much in his corner. Even SNL. Picture this. Can you imagine the President of the United States going out for a week in Poland, having to be walked back for 5 straight times, and the opening scene on SNL over the last 2 weeks is about the new Supreme Court justice or Justice Thomas, and controversial about his wife's tweets. And I'm saying, even the comedy is avoiding the comedy, and the press is avoiding the story, and still the American people go, I'm not looking for any judge. I don't need no filter. I made my opinions.
Interesting.
Yeah, you know, I think that President Biden made his biggest mistake on day one when he tried to appease the vocal minority in America, which is the progressive wing of the Democratic Party. When he killed Keystone XL pipeline, tried to shrink fossil fuel usage in this country. Fast forward to today, what happens? High gas prices, American Rescue Plan. He passed at a time when America didn't need to be rescued, now suffering the consequences with inflation. And Brian, I think you are absolutely right. The biggest dark mark on his resume so far has been the disastrous withdrawal from Afghanistan, which led to the deaths of 13 American service members. And you could link it to what's going on in Ukraine right now. Americans also link the Democratic Party with the defund the police movement, what's going on in schools, something we're going to be talking about a little later on. And what this really shows me, the reaction to all of this shows me that America is much more moderate than what the media wants to make you believe. And I think that the Biden administration, President Biden, should recognize that course correct. I don't know if he has the stomach or strength to do it, though.
Carly, I'll never forget after his election and then after his inauguration, you interviewing all of those families, the Keystone Pipeline employees. You traveled around the country and talking to all of those families that were hit, those towns, those communities that were hit. It was incredible. And here's the thing. So 2/3 of Americans consider inflation and these rising gas prices a difficulty or even a hardship. And yet this is an administration that responded to that by calling it the tragedy of the treadmill. We have a White House spokesperson that said, what do you want us to do? Propose new legislation for bunnies and ice cream? You think that's going to make things better? Actually, yeah. Legislation would absolutely make things better if you would reduce regulation, if you would increase oil production in the homeland. There is a huge disconnect between this administration and the elite point of view that they hold, that they continue to cast as their enemy, the average American citizen who's feeling these things so deeply at their kitchen table and yet refuse to acknowledge their part in it or the severity in it. And remember as well, Jen Psaki went on The View and she said, well, here's what Americans should do if they're feeling the pinch. Why don't they go to a kickboxing class and have a margarita? Well, right now I can't afford a kickboxing class, right? And I can't have a margarita because I am at work. So there's that big disconnect. And as you pointed out, there's going to be a reckoning at those polls for it.
You know, Kaylee, that disconnect that's being talked about, I go back to what you call the beach vacation.
Yes.
And north of 26% of the time, this president is at his beach house or his other domicile in Delaware.
Yes.
That's where he escapes to. And we can't really go there to follow him around to ask questions unless we want to do a lot of biking.
Mm-hmm.
See
Yes.
if we can shout it out.
That's right. I mean, I understand every president goes on vacation or, goes to a different place and the White House follows you. That's what Jen Psaki says. You have everything with you. Yes, that's true. However, you do not go to Delaware and then Camp David amid an Afghanistan collapse that leads to, the collapse of your poll numbers and even worse, a moral stain on our country. You don't go to Delaware every weekend as the Russian war is playing out and as inflation is the #1 concern. And to your point, Emily, Jen Psaki, have a margarita, go to kickboxing class. Sorry, Jen, I don't want a margarita. I don't want a kickboxing class. I want my country back.
There you go.
Or lower gas prices.
Would you also say that it's very interesting that Congress is starting to push the president, even when it comes to the Ukraine? Republicans, mostly Republicans, but Democrats too, are like, no, we heard Zelensky on that Saturday Zoom call, and we want to get him more. We want to cut off the Russian gas, Nancy Pelosi. We want to get him more equipment, Senator Blumenthal. We want to start answering that punch list, forcing Joe Biden to act. So on the border, this is basically somebody else says Title 42, let's let that go away. Wait a second, all chaos is breaking loose. Senator Kelly's upset. Senator Kirsten Sinema's upset.
Cuellar, who's in Texas, a Democrat.
So all of a sudden it's like, wait a second, now the fight's happening on your side, but it's not because of a president, like President Trump was very aggressive. These are my policies, deal with it. Okay. This guy seems to be very laid back. So if things happen around him, people respond, and when he's forced to, he steps out. It's almost as if it's that Tesla self-driving car that hasn't been fully worked out yet, and we have to try to get the president to grab his hands on the wheel again.
But is he laid back, or is this somewhat of a strategy? Because when you look at Boris Johnson on the world stage, walking down the streets of war-torn Kyiv, capital city of Ukraine, and then you hear the political reverb on all of that of, well, where is President Biden? I mean, I had a General Petraeus last hour saying, oh, no, they're doing a great job, and we couldn't put him there because you can't protect him, there are issues, so on and so forth. I'm paraphrasing. But you can put people anywhere you really want to put them. Is there something else he could do? Could he zoom in with Zelensky? Can we see the texture of those conversations that those two leaders are having? Because if you're going to lead, the American people have decided in the polling that they don't think he's doing a good job on this issue.
I'll be real quick just to answer your questions. Why did it take a month and a half to get S-300s there? We had to
well, we didn't do it.
Right.
Slovakia
we had to provide the Patriot missiles so they get the S-300s, which they can use. Why did it take 3 weeks? We got 1 week we had them in Poland. Why have we just said no to the tanks?
Why do you think it is?
Why do I think it is? I think there's a reluctance to get there. I go back to what Mark Milley said. It's going to fall in 72 hours. Ukraine will lose 15,000 troops.
Wrong.
Yeah, I think it's the weakness because he doesn't want to escalate the situation. Sorry, Brian, go ahead.
No, my thing is this. So you don't have to tell me you're doing a great thing. I'll figure it out for myself. And that's Boris Johnson's out front. But I'm saying we're not providing the information. Zelensky is telling you that every single time. We're not getting what we need.
Well, and what's coming down the pike, too? The bloodiest points of the war is what we're being told as they hired that general who's a butcher. All right, we got to